Hello and welcome to this week's podcast. I'm delighted to be talking to Dr. Joanne Foster today. Now, Joanne is really impressive. She has decades of experience in the gifted community and area. She is a parent, she's a teacher, a gifted education expert, educational consultant, and multiple award-winning author. She's written a bunch of books, and her most recently updated book is Being Smart About Gifted Learning, Empowering Parents and Kids Through Challenge and Change. So very relevant for what we're all going through at the moment. And she's co-authored that with Donna Matthews. Joanne focuses on supporting and encouraging children's well-being, including their intelligence, creativity, productivity, and self-confidence. So I was delighted that she stayed up late to have a chat with us today. In this podcast, we talk about how do we motivate our gifted kids. Joanne's written books about motivation and procrastination, as well as just books about all things gifted. So it was wonderful to have that conversation today about how do we help our gifted kids who are usually really self-motivated, especially when it comes to learning, but we all go through those patches and we need those tips and strategies to help motivate our kids, and sometimes they work for us too. We also talk about a framework that Joanne has devised called the Optimal Mat, which is all about supporting our gifted kids in terms of their learning. So stay tuned to hear more about that. It was really wonderful to talk to Joanne today. I even asked Joanne the question, should we be pushing our gifted kids? People talk a lot about potential in terms of giftedness. So stay tuned to hear what her response to that was. Thanks very much, and I hope you enjoy the episode as much as I did. Bye. Hi, I'm Sophia Elliott. As a parent of 3 gifted kids, I'm here to talk about all things gifted because I've been isolated and uncertain, and I felt like that parent. Then I found peace of mind, support, and my community. This podcast is about sharing that journey, actually parenting gifted kids, and connecting with advice and support. So we have everything we need for every member of our family to thrive. This is the Our Gifted Kid podcast. So today's guest is Dr. Joanne Foster. She's a parent, teacher, gifted education expert, educational consultant, and multiple award-winning author of lots of books, including the recently released Being Smart About Gifted Learning, Empowering Parents and Kids Through Challenge and Change, who she co-authored with Donna Matthews. And Joanne focuses on supporting and encouraging children's well-being, including their intelligence, creativity, productivity, and self-confidence. So it's an absolute delight to have you with us today. Joanne, thank you so much, all the way from Florida.
Well, today I'm in Florida, yes. Typically I'm in Toronto, which is my hometown, but we traveled down here for a little break, and it's actually quite pleasant to have the warmth and the palm trees, so I'm appreciating it.
Yeah, a big change from the snow back at home.
You said it, exactly.
So you had quite the distinguished career in giftedness with just decades of experience. And I'm wondering, how did you get started in this particular area?
Interesting question. I was a teacher for several years, and one day my principal called me in and said that we are going to start a gifted program in our area, and we'd like you to look after it. And I said, well, okay, that sounds interesting, but I don't have any training in gifted education. And he said, well, you're creative, you'll figure it out. So I went home that night and I thought about it, and I thought, okay, it's an opportunity. It's different. I like creativity. I like challenge. I'll do it. So I started reading up as much as I possibly could. This was back in the 1980s. And I took this class and I loved it. The children were excited to be there. They were dynamic in terms of their connections with each other. They came from different schools and they came to me every afternoon. And in the morning, I taught my normal math and English in the junior high school. And then I continued on in the field. I became a consultant. I learned everything I could. I got a master's degree in special education and adaptive instruction with a focus on gifted. And I went on to get a doctoral degree in human development and applied psychology, again, with a focus on gifted. And I just kept at it. I went to every conference I could go to. I read everything I could. I researched, I wrote. And over the years, I've just learned more. I'm a lifelong learner, and I share whatever knowledge I possibly can in order to be able to help other people navigate this rather tricky landscape.
Yeah, definitely tricky. And wow, that's quite the journey. So you started off as a teacher, and like many teachers, even not having the background, and then just finding your way through a whole lot of research. And that
I also taught at the University of Toronto in the
Mhm.
teacher education program. So I taught gifted education and educational psychology. And that was a real eye opener for me, too, because in a lot of ways, teachers are not necessarily trained to
Mm.
deal in the area of gifted education. So for me, another important aspect of what I did over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. And we find that here in Australia as well. Our teachers are starting out their careers without that adequate training and, initial support and knowledge. So that's certainly a difficult place to start from in terms of then having to potentially have gifted kids or being able to identify, that a child is gifted. So that kind of interests me. You're obviously, like you said, a lifelong learner and very motivated yourself. And I actually was talking to a parent recently, and they were asking the question of how do we motivate a a child, or particularly a gifted child, who just is not motivated to learn, which I thought was a really interesting question, given that when you think of giftedness, you think of that rage to learn, that kind of intrinsic motivation. But I guess there are times where even gifted kids kind of lose that motivation and drive. So you how can we help motivate our gifted kids to learn?
I'll give you two tips to start with. The first is value attribution. If somebody feels that a particular task or activity is authentically relevant, that it
Mm.
matters, it has value to it, then they're more likely to be motivated by it. And the second has to do with having an optimal match, making sure that the learning and the learner are well matched in terms of what the child can do and what's being asked of them. So the expectations, the actual preparation, the step by step that's required over the long haul, these need to be appropriately matched so that the child feels comfortable around what it is they're expected to do. I'm going to tell you a little story, okay? Because
Yeah.
it maybe it'll illustrate this a little bit, and I write about this in one of my books, in Not Now, Maybe Later. And briefly, it's a story about a little girl named Pauline, and she's in this class, and the teacher has been working on descriptive vocabulary. And the assignment that she gives to the class is that you have to describe a day in the life of something: a beach, a rock, an icy pond, a farmer's field, whatever. And it can either be real or imagined. You pick your locale, and you have to write 2 page description. So Pauline goes home and she thinks about it, and she says to herself, yeah, like, this is boring. Like, what goes on a rock? What goes on in a field? Like, this is stupid. I don't want to do this. I'm not motivated by it. Forget it. I can do more interesting things than that. And a couple of days later, the teacher's going around the room and she's asking everybody, have you picked your spot? And everybody's saying yes. And someone's saying, oh, I'm going to do a pigsty. And somebody else says, oh, I'm going to do the moon. And someone else says, I'm going to do a golf course. And everybody's all excited. And the teacher gets to Pauline and says, well, what are you going to do? And Pauline, of course, has just written the whole thing off, not interested. It's stupid. And so she quickly comes up with the idea, I'll do the playground across the road from my house. And the teacher says, okay, that's a great idea. Pauline goes home. She talks to her mom and she says, I'm stuck. I have to do this stupid playground. I have to describe it. And I don't want to do this. I don't want to put forth the effort. I'm just not motivated. Right. So in this instance, it was just not aligned with what Pauline was wanting to do. But she was stuck. She had to come up with something. So she looked outside her window, and she hadn't been in this park for ages. And she thought about it, and she saw the swing sets, and she saw kids playing, and she thought, I wonder what goes on there. Look, there's flowers, and the trees look pretty interesting. They've grown over the years. Maybe this won't be so bad after all. And then she decides, well, I'm going to go across the road and actually have a look. And she starts talking to the kids, and she sees little plaques, and she sees what fun they're having. And she talks to the caregivers and the mums, and she looks at what's happening there. And all of a sudden she becomes more interested. And then she starts thinking, listen, there's birds and there's dogs, and her senses kick in. And she wonders, well, what happens here at night? Do the flowers close up? Are there lights? Like, what goes on here? And she decides, I'm going to get a tape recorder and I'm going to go in and I'm going to actually tape what goes on here. And as she became more invested in the activity, she became more motivated. And ultimately, she did an amazing project. She did a cover page, she did a video, she did a soundtrack. She was excited because she had found a way to make it her own. And I think that the lesson here is that if you can help children find something that makes it their own, that they can take responsibility for and feel independent about and connect with other people with it as well, because she spoke to people at the park, then that makes a huge difference. If someone really feels that the activity or the task is meaningful and that it suits their ability level and they can make it more interesting for themselves, that will be motivating. Long answer to a short question, but
yeah, no, and a brilliant answer. It really comes to the heart of a gifted kid's sense of, I guess it's almost like, there's that inherent sense of justice, which I think links itself to that sense of it's got to have meaning for me. Yeah, I've got to be able to relate that back to something
exactly.
that I feel is important, which we talk a lot about in terms of that strength-based approach. So that leads me on to a few other questions. As a parent of gifted kids, especially in those early days of coming to terms with, oh my goodness, my child is gifted. What does that mean? The potential gets talked about a lot. Should we be pushing our gifted kids harder and further?
Okay, so first of all, the word potential is really tough. Nobody knows anybody else's potential, really. I mean, we don't have tea leaves, we don't have crystal balls. We have to move forward without trying to put anybody into a box around what their potential may or may not be, because it develops over time with the right opportunities to learn and with the kinds of encouragement and support that kids need in order to thrive. And in terms of pushing kids, I think that we really need to be careful around that, because what we really want to do is support them. We want to support their efforts, their journeys, and celebrate the small steps as well as the big ones. Success is really a matter of small increments at a time, small bursts of effort. And sometimes there's bigger bursts too, but not always. So when we push kids, we really have to be patient, and we have to enable them to find that value in what it is they're doing, to ask the questions they need to ask, to have the choices that they need to have the time, the extra time sometimes, in order to be able to consolidate the learning that they want to do. So supporting as opposed to pushing, I think, is important, and to show faith in their abilities, to have confidence in them, because that will translate into them having confidence in themselves. I think one of the things that's really important, and this is a word that's probably not on the tip of your tongue, but it's on the tip of mine today, because I just posted an article at the Creativity Post, and the title of the article is Tenacity. Mm-hmm. And it's just an 8-letter word, and it's a really easy little word, but it's such an important word. I encourage people just to go to creativitypost.com and take a look. It's on the feature. It was just posted this afternoon. And I talk about how we have to encourage children to push themselves instead of us as parents. And I'm a parent too, and a grandparent. But instead of pushing them, encourage them to find ways to make the learning meaningful for themselves, to have resilience, to allow themselves to have creative expression, to make mistakes by taking sensible risks, and know that it's okay. They can get help along the way if they need it. Anyways, I think tenacity is a big helper. It's a helper for parents in terms of supporting their kids, helping them find new ways of being a maverick, of taking the reins, and also helping children find how they themselves can be tenacious and work forwards.
Absolutely. I like that tenacity. Tenacity is a great word, like you say. And I think it's sort of, because I think it sort of pulls out that idea of determination and grit. And something that gifted kids, perhaps skills that they do need to learn because things often come so easily to them. And you can overlay that with sometimes the stress or high expectation of this idea of potential, which gets talked about a lot with giftedness. And I completely agree with you in terms of I don't like the word potential. And I know sometimes, and I know in the UK, they kind of don't use gifted, they say high learning potential. And while I don't like the label gifted either, what I worry about the term potential is that sense of an expectation I have to live up to that is imagined. And if I don't live up to that, therefore I'm failing and I'm not successful. And I just think that is a disaster waiting to happen. Like you say, we cannot look into tea leaves and see what is that potential, what is this mysterious mythical thing that you're supposed to live up to. So I think that's a really crucial lesson for parents of gifted kids. So thank you for that. What advice do you have for parents? Like we've talked about effort already, and when things come so easily, it can be hard to actually build up that muscle of grit that you were sort of talking about. So how do we as parents help our gifted kids have that sort of intrinsic motivation to make that effort when things get hard? And I guess it comes back to the motivation that we were talking about earlier.
Right. And it's a very good question. I think, first of all, parents have to make sure that the rules and the expectations are fitting and fair and flexible. So those are three really important. Fitting, in other words, going back to that match between the learner and the learner's capacities and the kinds of opportunities that are being offered in terms of their learning. Fairness, that the timelines, the availability of materials, the availability of supports, those are there for the child if and when they need them. And also being flexible, having that opportunity to negotiate a little bit around timelines, or if there's a lot of creativity that all of a sudden comes to the fore, in the same way that Pauline all of a sudden wanted to try different things at night with the recording and so on, and taking maybe extra time to do that. So fit, fairness, and flexibility. Another thing is to pay very close attention to your child's skill levels. They may not have the same skill level in all different subject areas. So, be aware of that. You might have a child who has what we call asynchronous development, which means that, they may be terrific in math, but maybe not so good in some other areas. So keeping an eye out in terms of the domain of learning and making sure that whatever is being asked of them is well suited to their capacities in that level. Also interest, whether or not the child is interested in what it is, that will of course motivate them as well. And their emotional strengths, what's going on in their lives. So, with COVID and with all the uncertainty and vulnerability and so forth that's happening right now, that's right at the forefront of what's going on in schools and families, and the kinds of coping mechanisms that children have are very relevant, and how parents are modeling the kinds of coping mechanisms they themselves use, and what's happening within the family constellation, that dynamic, the nucleus, the safe haven of home, and whether or not that's being supportive of a child. So those are important factors.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned the creativity, what was it called? The creativity post.
Right. I have over 70 articles in there. I write for them. I put a different column in every month. I've written about praise and reassurance and creativity and gifted learners and like all kinds of things. So again, I encourage people to go there. And all of this is accessible on my website. I have a resource page, and you can just sort of click on and get my articles from the creativity post from there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll put the link to those pages
Sure. Okay.
In the show notes so everyone can have a look. I was actually having a look through the articles this morning, and there are lots of amazing articles there. One caught my eye on laziness, which I felt was topical because we were going to talk about effort. And that's a really great article, which I will put in the show notes too. And because it just kind of comes back to what you were saying about everyone's current our current sense of well-being, given what a crazy year it's been with COVID. A lot of people have been in lockdown, homeschooling, or in and out of lockdown, or just a general sense of uncertainty. As we get to what is the end of the academic year here in Australia, although I know it's slightly different in the US and in the Northern Hemisphere, like our kids are knackered, as are we. And so when it comes to our expectation and what we're expecting the effort for our kids to put into school at the moment, or even stuff at home, we have lowered that benchmark. It's like,
right,
as long as you're getting through the day, as long as you're getting to school, that is kind of, the benchmark is so low because the resilience is really down. I was talking to one of the teachers only a couple of days ago, and she was saying how one of my kids was struggled with something at school because they were doing this scavenger hunt and it wasn't in numerical order, and that was enough to kind of do in that child the fact that it was out of order. Like, my resilience is so low, I'm just going to put my hoodie up and shut down for a bit. And thankfully the parents at the teachers at this particular school understand the children very well and could see that, okay, resilience is low over there, we'll let them just kind of do what they need to. And and then they rejoined and had a great day. But it was just kind of acknowledging that even our kids, they need that rest, and
absolutely,
like we do.
Yes, it's everybody's frazzled,
Yeah.
and we do have to make sure that there's time for life balance, for rest and reading and play, which is hugely important. We have to keep in mind children's past experiences, what sort of put them over the edge before, what are the strengths that they can call upon to make the day better? What kind of positive attitude can they bring forward and use as a way to propel them? What sort of work habits do they need additional help on? Are they disorganized these days? Do they need more help with time management? Priorities, goal setting, those kinds of skill sets that may have somehow gotten sidelined or rocked in some way. They may need help. And really important, and we sometimes forget that, is please and thank you. We're so busy going about our business and doing and expecting kids to do this, that, and the other, that sometimes what they just need is a time to pause, step back, step aside, and just say, please and thank you, and can we talk and chat about things? Really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're really feeling that at the moment. And I don't know if this year they're more, I don't know, it feels like they're more knackered than usual. And I think the last couple of years are taking their toll on everyone, generally speaking.
What is knackered? I've never heard the word knackered before. Knackered. And how do you spell it? I want to use it in my writing. I love it.
I have to say, it's one of my favorite words. I probably use it a lot. So it's
I've never heard it.
Knackered, knackered. And I guess it just means tired, but physically kind of exhausted as well as tired. So you really just, at the end of your rope. Yeah. So
not being able to manage.
Yeah,
basically?
That's right. You just
okay.
You're tired, you're physically excited, you can't manage. It's just like game over, totally knackered. It's a head to toe, totally knackered. Yeah.
When I use it in my writing, I'm going to cite you. Is that okay?
That's totally fine. I love that. I love that.
That's why I asked how to spell it. I don't want to get it wrong.
Yeah, no, that's great.
But sometimes too, when you're feeling knackered, the best thing is to be creative.
Yeah,
to figure out a new way to do something, to take a little bit of time just to let things percolate.
Definitely.
We're all so busy rushing around and trying to accomplish things that, my goodness, it's only 24 hours in a day.
Exactly. I think we do demand too much of ourselves and our kids sometimes. And it's a good opportunity to reevaluate, I think, as you get to the end of the year and sort of see what's essential and how can we lower those expectations and Yeah, provide some space for a bit of creativity or rest. I wanted to ask you today as well, in the book that you've recently republished, it's called Being Smart About Gifted Learning, Empowering Parents and Kids Through Challenge and Change. You talk about something called the optimal match. So I wanted to take the opportunity to have a little conversation about that, because I think that's a really interesting approach and for gifted kids. So tell us, what is that all about?
So it's really about being flexibly responsive to what children need and want to learn, and finding opportunities to address those needs and wants, and basically providing a range of options for kids. So I know it sounds like a lot of work, because what do you mean a range of options? Let me just give them one and they'll be happy. And it doesn't work like that. But there are so many possibilities for learning, and children can also help co-create their learning. But if you stop to think about the kinds of opportunities that are out there, especially with technology, I mean, for example, there's a little girl I know who wanted to learn more about hieroglyphics. And so she went online and contacted someone in Egypt who was a professor at a university, who was kind enough to provide her with information on hieroglyphics. Another little girl wanted to learn about Russian literature. Teacher and her parents didn't know anybody who knew anything about Russian literature, but they found somebody at another school who knew somebody who did. So reaching out, finding mentors, finding cross grade resources, independent studies, finding things that need to be fixed, volunteering in the community, acceleration and enrichment in certain areas, if that's a possibility, entrepreneurial opportunities, leadership opportunities. In Being Smart About Gifted Learning, Donna Matthews and I spend 2 chapters on different kinds of learning opportunities that might be considered by parents, by teachers, by grandparents, by anybody who wants to help a child develop. And I'll go back to the word potential, but again, that open-ended sense that you can do anything, you can be anything. And again, it's interesting, because going back to tenacity, the example I gave in that particular article that was posted today was that I can take a picture of a sunset by stepping outside, but I can also take a picture of a sunset by going someplace different and stretching my horizons. And maybe I can't find a beach or a mountain or a desert to do it in, but what else can I do? What is it that I can do to push my own limits, to stretch my horizons, and to be creative in new ways, and to make a better match for me, so that if somebody says take a picture of a sunset, it's not boring and frustrating for me, but it's an expression of my soul, my spirit, my mind, my desires, my aspirations. If I want to play a harp, if I want to learn to skateboard, if I want to take up a sport that I've never tried before, what do I have to do? What are my steps? So what do I have to explore? And how can my parents help me sort of get there? So an optimal match is a matter of finding what it is that you really are keen to learn to do, and then finding ways to do it.
So have you got any advice then for parents on different ways that they can help their child find those matches?
Have a discussion, first of all, around what it is they want to do, and make sure that it's realistic. I mean, someone who wants to ride a horse may not be able to have a horse. I mean, logistically. So you have to make sure that what they want to do is realistic, and that there might be alternatives, or there might be negotiation or compromises that need to be done. Keep in mind your own family dynamic and finances, and what kinds of things you can realistically put in place. Because technology is there, we have opportunities to explore different options, so that makes it a little bit better. And again, the co-creation, the idea that children have to think about what really matters to them, and to build upon what it is they can already do. So for example, let's say somebody wants to build a flying machine. Well, that's a great idea. Let's build a flying machine, but it's not going to happen unless you know a little bit about aerodynamics. You go online, you find out books, you learn what makes things fly. You build from what it is that you already know, and those are the beginning steps to work with. Help a child find their beginning steps before they try to sort of hit the ground running.
I love that, because we talk a lot about strength-based learning and supporting our kids in terms of focusing on their strengths and interests. So this feels like a really nice framework, to lean on in order to support them in that way. You've kind of mapped out,
Right.
map that out further with a bit of guidance for us, and different kinds of ways that we can support our kids, in their interests, because it can be a bit overwhelming for parents to kind of go, oh, okay, where do I go from here? So it's really nice sometimes to have a bit of a roadmap of, oh, okay, here's a whole bunch of options and ideas and strategies and tools. What's going to work for us as a family? What's going to be the right fit for my child, as well as, like you say, the family logistics as well. So,
right, being open to possibilities, but making sure they're practical. That's really important. And also connecting with the teacher in ways that are meaningful, and advocating for more professional development for teachers as well, so that they can actually learn to differentiate for children more specifically and more broadly and more astutely. I think those are really important, because we want to make sure that the teachers have the kinds of supports and tools and know-how to be able to support children's learning in the best way possible. So parents can advocate, they can be open to possibilities, and they can look for activities that are multidimensional and that are exciting. We all like to do things that are exciting and fun and bring us joy. And kids are no different. You stick a pile of busy work in front of them, or you give them stuff that's boring, they're just going to tune out. So we can be better than that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's something that I always say is, as well, it's like we can do better. And so we've talked about, how do we motivate our kids who might be suffering with a bit of lack of motivation? And we've talked about effort, and we've come around to this idea of the optimal match, and there are different ways and tools and strategies that we can use to inspire them and tap into that sort of sense of curiosity of the world, and bring that learning back to life if they're sort of struggling. And I think that's a really nice wraparound. And at the same time, acknowledging sometimes we do need a bit of downtime because we are knackered. Or in this household, scunnet isn't another word that we use. My husband's Scottish.
Stop. Say that one again.
Scunnet. It's a Scottish word, and it's similar to knackered, but I think it's even more exhausted. So scunnet.
Can you spell that, please?
I'm not sure that I can. I'll look it up.
Okay, send me an email, please do.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah, I love it. It's very descriptive. It just kind of, for me, it's just this image of real exhaustion and just, nothing left in the tank. So words are great, aren't they?
Love them. That's why I write.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joanne, you are a prolific writer. There's so many articles. I will absolutely share those links that we've talked about today, because there's a lot of great tips and strategies and tools for parents in all of those articles. And so I guess just as we wrap up, any kind of last thoughts for parents on just those topics of, we've talked about effort and motivation and, I guess, rest.
Yeah, I think the first is that you have to create an environment of safety and trust for your child, that they know that at home they've got someone to go to, and they're always paddling so quickly, and just sometimes to acknowledge that they don't have to dazzle all the time, that it's okay, and at home it's secure and it's safe. And this is really important, like now, especially during these times of challenge and change that the whole world is going through. Stay attuned to your child's interests and abilities, and try to make that match between what it is they want to learn and need to learn, and what it is that's being provided for them. Bridging any gaps and paying attention to what it is that they're wondering about. You mentioned curiosity, that sense of wonder, that knowledge acquisition, and also the skills that they might need in order to be able to next level, to go and advance themselves further. And I think what fits your child in the context of your family, which we mentioned. And I think setting good examples. Parents are in a good position to be able to examples around how to cope, how to balance responsibilities, time management, time for play and reading and reflection, and all those other things that are part of the real world. I mean, academics in school is not everything, and there's a whole lot more that goes on. So being aware of that, setting good examples, and showing too that you are a lifelong learner, you are creative, you are doing things that matter, because it's kind of like when you go on an airplane and they tell you to put your own oxygen mask on before you put one on your child. It's the same thing. As parents, we need to look after ourselves, self-care, and making sure that we can breathe, that we're not so knackered that we're out. And I think that's a really important thing. So I guess the first one was safety and trust, an environment of safety and trust. The second is being attuned to your child. And the third is to be available and to set good examples around what it is that really matter in life.
Yeah, I absolutely hear you on all of those factors, and especially on putting the oxygen mask on yourself first. And because, we all get sort of worn down with challenging parenting, and it can be really hard. And we're not at our best as parents if we're not, if our cup is empty, and it's hard to find time to remedy that, but definitely something that needs to be a priority, I think. Something I'm working on anyway.
We all are. Everybody who breathes is working on it.
Yeah.
Especially these days. Yes.
Yeah, it is. It's really tricky. It is really tricky. Figuring out what it is that rejuvenates you has been a topic this whole year, has been something that a question I've been asking myself. Because I think, especially as a parent, and a mum, but I think dads as well, you lose yourself for a long while as a parent, and then you need to kind of figure out, right, what do I love, what rejuvenates me, and if I've got that spark, well, then I'm going to parent better, because I'm going to be grounded and rested and coming from a better place, and that leads to our children feeling safer and supported and all of those things. So yeah, really great note to end on. Joanne, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really lovely to have this chat with you and to dig a little bit deeper into some of those challenges around motivation and effort and finding those optimal matches for our kids. And I'll definitely put links into your books as well.
Please. Okay.
Yeah, because a great opportunity for parents to find a roadmap there, and lots of tools and strategies and ideas to put these things into practice. So thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure chatting with you, and I've learned 2 new words too.
No, it's a good day. I'll put those links in the show notes as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. No, this has been a treat. And I just want to take a minute to thank you for all that you do for the gifted community, the information that you share, the opportunities you provide for people to be able to express themselves and convey information, and basically to connect and strengthen one another. So that's a really important job that you do, and you do it so well. So thank you.
Oh, no worries. It's an absolute privilege. Thank you very much. Cheers. If you enjoyed this episode and it inspired you in some way, I'd love to hear about your biggest takeaway in the comments. For more episodes, you can subscribe, and to help others find our podcast, please leave a review. You can find show notes and more resources at ourgiftedkids.com, and connect with us on Facebook and Instagram. See you in the same place next week.